That's a little better. All right, people. So, how you doing? Hope everyone's doing well. A little bit not as prepared as usual here, so pardon the. I'm just gonna put this off. Pardon the tardiness here. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to sort of come online. Make sure you say hi in the chats and ask whatever questions at any moment. Don't wait for a break. Just leave the questions in there. Hey, Jay Wallaby 789. Hey, bro, end of the week. Doing better now. Awesome. Good to see ya. Nice ship. Thank you, Sim Sadie. Yeah, it's the newest addition to my library. Is it stodgy enough in here or what? Yeah, welcome guys. Make sure you ask lots of questions. Thank you so much, Jay Wallaby, for being here. It's nice seeing you. All of you feel free to ask questions. Now, if you guys are not familiar with me, maybe it showed up in your feed just by virtue of the fact that it was tagged Jehovah's Witnesses or live stream or something like that. I'll give you a little bit of background on me. Obviously, my name is Derek London, and I was raised as a witness. I was born in, and very zealous from a young age. I was baptized at the age of 13. As soon as I was baptized, I can't remember if it was as soon as I was baptized. Hi, AC, nice to see you. I don't know if it was as soon as I was baptized or 6 months later that I became a regular auxiliary. I kind of think it was right out the gate, because it's when you become a regular pioneer that there's a 6 month delay. You can't do that. And my situation was kind of funny, being as I was so young and I was homeschooled. There was actually an elders meeting, like, is this wise for, for this kid to be regular pioneering right out the gate, 6 months afterwards. But yeah, I mean, very zealous from a young age. And then when I was 17, I think, thereabouts, they made a call to all the kind of congregations in that area for the American Sign Language group. And so I was part of that up until I left Edmonton. This was all in Edmonton. And yeah, American Sign Language, we grew that into a congregation. I was there for a few years. I was asked to serve as a ministerial servant, I believe twice, definitely once. But I think there was even a second time where they were like, hey, are you feeling any different about this? I just felt so inadequate. I've always been sort of self-deprecating and unconfident. So, yeah, I was... and I was pioneering for about between 5 and 6 years, closer to 6, I think. I'd gone through the pioneer school and all this. And then I went off the list just because it was so hard to make ends meet. I was kind of an invisible pioneer for several months. I'm feeling really guilty, because that's what you do when you're a witness, is you feel guilty about everything. And then I was, I went to meetings and, here and there out in service, field ministry for maybe about a year, and then I fell off and just became inactive. And then I moved here when I was just about 26. Maybe I was 26. I'm now in Victoria, BC. And that's kind of, having that distance, that's where I woke up to everything and the corruptions that were going on. So that's kind of my background. If you guys want to ask about my personal story, that's more than welcome. And also, if you guys, I've gotten a lot of questions privately and in the comments of various Jehovah's Witness videos I've done. And so I'm going to be addressing those, reading them out, and kind of answering that at the same time. So with all that prolegomena out of the way, good to see everybody. Swim Sadie said, your office must smell like 7 expensive strains of pipe tobacco. Oh my God. Yeah, I wish I smoked that recently because I do love pipe tobacco. I kind of just do it on special occasions now. Was there one specific issue that flicked the light on for you? That's a very good question, Swim Sadie. Yeah, it kind of was actually. Uh, the there's always that cognitive dissonance in the back of your mind, right? Oh, and by the way, sorry to divagate here. Do tell me if the volume is okay. I've got it hiked up. It was certainly okay last live stream. It's just so much extra nonsense here to hook up the mic and have OBS running, and it just kind of takes away from. It's stressful for me. So anyway, I hope this is okay. Tell me if I need to speak up. Back to the main issue here, specific issue. My grandparents passed away within a couple of months of each other. My grandfather was a very prominent elder, on the hospital liaison committee, almost papal in his reputation, especially here on Vancouver Island. And so he passed away, and there was all kinds of nonsense related to a particular elder who, one of his sons is a very credibly accused pedophile, serving as an elder. I don't know if he's presently an elder. And yeah, so that was, their dealings, the way how corrupt they split up the estate among the children, and all of the fallout, like, oh, so and so is not spiritual. And of course, I was the kind that I was very accommodating, and even though I hadn't fully woken up at this point, I was very accommodating to those who had accused my uncle of pedophilia. And so, which makes me really believe her testimony now. She's dead now, by the way. What made me believe this even more is it was like, this light, the switch just flicked on, and it was like Derek is public enemy number one to this guy, and there's him and another sibling that was kind of what's the word, affiliated with him, or really trying to do some funny business on the estate. We're all actively opposing and silencing people like me, who was more accommodating to this pedophile's accuser. And they called her demonized and all this nonsense. And so that was, all of my family, and not all of my family, but a lot of my social structure was starting to maybe not overtly shun me. Some of them were. Others were kind of on the fence and being coy with me. And so that was when I started to kind of feel the results of shunning, and how it's like, no, people, the view on this is not quite as varied as I thought. I was never the type to shun anybody. I might have limited my association with certain people, but I always thought that most people were pretty progressive on that. But when you start to feel that, you start asking questions, and I wasn't so much. I didn't wake up to the witnesses per se first. I kind of questioned all religious claims, which, if you're religious, by the way, you're more than welcome, and ask questions. And I do respect a lot of religious thinkers, but I can't square it in my mind. I've tried to. And so once that deck of cards fell, the witnesses was a logical consequence. I just couldn't maintain this belief anymore. And all of those questions that you have in the back of your mind, like, for example, how they arrived at 1914. The math adds up, but the premise of 607, it's just like, where did you get that from, my friend? So, that all sort of added up, and it was like, yeah, we're starting from the conclusion and working backwards, So that was my story about leaving. That was the main thing. And of course I heard of the excuse me, I'm nervous, guys, by the way. Hearing about the Royal Australian Commission, Australian Royal Commission, I read that entire report, the initial report that is, back around 2015, 16, and that opened my eyes to a lot of what was going on. Although, the fact that there was pedophilia in the organization didn't surprise me, and it didn't surprise me that the organization took a very litigious stance towards it. I'm not entirely against that, by the way. You shouldn't have to pay for more than you're obligated, and due process is very important. And so that didn't so much surprise me, but of course, how rigidly they stuck to the two-witness rule, and then of course Jeffrey Jackson's testimony, whatever that was, holy smokes, that was like totally a Peter moment for him, throwing the governing body under the bus like that and saying, it's up to personal interpretation and all this. We got a lot of comments here. First of all, thank you so much, Jay Wallaby 789, for your super chat. That's very nice of you for your contribution. I really appreciate that. Okay, so, oh yes, room noise. Sorry, I just noticed this now. I forgot to turn off this fan. Sorry. I didn't want to be like one of those live streamers that, is constantly going back from what he's talking about to the comments. So I completely forgot about that fan. I hope that's better. And thank you for telling me. Room noise is a bit high. Sounds like a fan, but you're completely audible. That's good. Volume is good over here. Thank you, Swim Sadie. AC, what kind of support did you have when you left? Were all of your acquaintances JWs? AC, yeah. So my support system was pretty good, actually. Like, first of all, I think that when I am proud of myself, the way I handled things is I didn't go out on a big crusade, like against the witnesses. I did write some letter to my family calling out kind of the nonsense more related to the family stuff, and said, I know the doctrines better than most of you that I'm addressing, because of my position within the society for so many years. So yeah, it was like, there's no reason to be shunning people like this and treating them so horribly. So that was what I spoke up about, but I never took issue with the doctrines or said that the governing body is full of it and you're all in a cult. It's you're gonna alienate yourself pretty fast by doing that. So I didn't do that, and I managed to retain a fair amount of people that were, if I had otherwise taken that position, would have probably shunned me or severely limited their association with me. But because I didn't do anything too drastic, they were good with me for the most part. I wouldn't go for a coffee with them necessarily, but text and email sort of basis, and they would acknowledge me, as they said. If they saw me out and about, they wouldn't turn a cold shoulder to me. They'd still acknowledge my existence, and so that was really nice. Thank you so much, AC, for the super chat. That's very, very kind of you guys for doing this. Again, thank you so much, Jay Wallaby. That means a lot. So yeah, that was the support I had. Were all of your acquaintances JWs? AC, so yeah, I still had a lot of acquaintances, certainly, that were connected with the witnesses, mostly marginal. What's so funny is I had this one friend, I've kind of mentioned him in other videos. He never did anything for the religion, like not a bloody thing. He was always marginal, and could have been disfellowshipped on many accounts that I was actually witness to some of his behavior. But we were both marginal at the time, and it was like, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. And but I did kind of talk to him because he is my closest friend at the time. I said, like, how do you feel about the governing body? Do you think they're really divine? And I was starting to ask questions like that because we had no problems disagreeing with certain doctrinal things um, in front of each other. Like, you know, he would have been the last person I thought to kind of call me apostate for just having certain questions. But even he, who remains a Pomey to this day, even he uh, started shunning me and being funny. Like, and it's like, you have no reason to judge anybody. You know, I wasn't working on you. I just asked your personal views on this. I disagreed with how people were shunning and all the things that go on. Um, yeah, so, but he was incredibly hypocritical. Um, that was really the only support people from the religion that I had, and of course my fiance was very supportive, is still very supportive. Um, I don't want to mention others because I don't want to throw them under the bus, and they still have some friends in the organization, and I don't want to kind of compromise them. But they were really good too. Overall, you know, it was just the people that I kind of really locked horns with that were terrible to me. Um, you deserve to be heard. Thanks, Jay Wallaby 789. So I think I'm caught up on your questions. Loving your Titanic in the background. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go into some questions that I got privately, and feel free to ask more questions. I'll be sort of bouncing back and forth. Um, okay, this was really good. I noted this down. This, I can't remember. This was definitely privately, so I'm not going to compromise this person's name or anything like that. I have no one to turn to, as all my family and acquaintances are Jehovah's Witnesses. Where will I find strength once I leave? That's a very good question, and I'm very, very sorry to hear about that. There's a few things here, and I'm going to kind of take this one slow because I want to cover all my bases and make sure you have a good answer for this. Um, First of all, I made a video talking about it's something like should I leave the Jehovah's Witnesses? I can't remember the exact name of it. Just look through all my Jehovah's Witness playlist and it'll be in there. And so yeah, you should definitely ask yourself if leaving is what you want to do. You know, for some people there's just no reparations possible in this, and they have to leave family members behind for their own sanity, and all the power to you. Other people, they're too invested. I have a question coming up about that, by the way. So I'll be coming back to that point. But it sounds like you're already, you know, wizened to everything that's going on. Where will you find the strength once you leave? There's a few things. I would say first and foremost, this does become something of a medical issue, and many people don't think that. They just think, well, I'm just, you know, I'm being shunned. This is a religious circumstance. Well, it does fall under mental illness. There are specific categories for people who have been abused and traumatized by religious intolerance, and so I would start there. You know, like if you don't know how to process some of these feelings, take it seriously psychologically. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Certainly, if you're in the Western land, you probably are. Where are you from, by the way? If you don't mind showing up, if you're watching this, certainly register in the comments. Um, there's a lot of programs that even online. I mean, this is a lot of what my channel has discussed. Apart from the witnesses, is the mental health industry. Lots of resources online. Take advantage of them. You know, there lots of stuff is subsidized by the government, and there's a lot of things that are just there for public use. So take advantage of that. There's also, of course, I would recommend the community online, and there's all kinds of support groups, chat rooms, and things throughout the ex-witness community. Lots of people, even if you're going to have differences of opinion on, you know, whether you became an atheist or, you know, you just went to another branch of Christianity or your New Age or whatever, you know, there's, most people recognize that, you know, there's a certain amount of humanity and compassion that everyone is afforded just by leaving this group. Uh, you know, for example, I'm on this Facebook group, uh, XJW Facebook group of some kind, and there's a lot of atheists on there, and so, you know, if you start talking about religion and stuff, you'll kind of be called out for that. But most of them, if you talk about your background, they're very sympathetic, very helpful. You know, take advantage of that as well. The comments are full of people, really good people I've come in touch with. Maybe you might want to start a YouTube channel and add your voice to the community, your perspective. That's very valuable. Um, Other things that might give you strength. There was another thing that I was thinking of here. Give me a moment. Oh, this is a very big thing. Big disclaimer first. Definitely take it seriously. You know, like I'm not saying to just ignore the witnesses anymore, any of the news coming out of there. This was a part of your life, for heaven's sakes. It's not going to go away. So definitely take that seriously. But I would also very highly recommend keeping being mindful about your diet on this stuff. Like, how much of this XJW content are you consuming in a week, in a day? You know, I would say, like, I mean, especially if you're just leaving, it's going to be quite a bit, and some of that is necessary. Again, a la my disclaimer. But at the same time, don't let this dominate your life. The whole reason you're leaving is because there's a life beyond the witnesses, right? And this is all about empowerment too. You know, you don't answer to these people anymore. That's why you left, is to experience life. You know, so enjoy life, and there's a whole mental domain that is you can enjoy now. You can enjoy mental freedom to, well, for example, if you were raised as a witness, you probably did a lot of reading, and if Jehovah's Witnesses didn't destroy that for you, now you have the world's books to go to. You know, that's certainly what I loved, as you can tell. You know, like I enjoy the mind so much. You know, that you can explore ideas and fiction and culture and travel and all the rest of it. You know, like, revel in that. That's wonderful. You have your mind now. You're not what's the word? You're not limited by belief. So those are big things that I'd all recommend. If there's something I'm missing, I apologize, and maybe I'll make a separate video out of this someday if I think of other things. But I would certainly start with that. Great question. I don't know if you're here watching that, but that was sent to me personally, and I wanted to address that. Okay, we got a couple more comments here. J Wallaby 789. It's so easy to slip. I need to wet the whistle here for a moment. It's so easy to slip into nihilism and depression when a JW exits, but forming a support group does help. It feels unnatural, but it's well worth the effort to be open to making new connections. Absolutely, yeah, I really agree with that. Thank you so much, Swin Sadie, for the $7 there. That's, all of you guys are so incredibly generous. This is very nice of you. That goes a long way. You know, it's being on YouTube. I mean, we don't make much money doing this, not yet anyway. And I make a little bit of money on Medium with some of the content I make. So that goes a long ways, guys. Thank you so much. Back to what you're saying, J Wallaby 789. Nihilism is a very big thing. I think that's probably the biggest temptation to atheism. Wouldn't you agree? Why it's so appealing is you know you're kind of born into a losing battle, you know, and I really think the Jehovah's Witnesses, there's actually an expression for this kind of an exit from religion, which I realize not all of you are doing. Some of you are still religious, but a lot of you are leaving religion. They call it Protestant atheism. And I think witnesses are definitely a form of Protestant atheism, where it's a very round attack, a very direct attack, I should say, against clerisy, against revealed truth, and Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, are an anti-room for most people before they become atheists, because they've castigated all other faiths. They condemn them so badly as the world empire of false religion, and so that next step is very easy to make, unless you're really sold on the Bible. But as we know, if you're a witness, nothing trumps the word of the governing body and their spin on the Bible, even though they say, biblical authority trumps everything. So, I think once there's a lot of people out there who think, if not the governing body, who else? Who else comes close? The Jehovah's Witnesses have exposed so many inconsistency in other religions. So they're kind of a logical anti-room to atheism. And that does seem to be the trend that people go to. So nihilism, I think, is the next thing with that. If you're an atheist and you think, geez, am I really the product of mindless, unguided processes? And are we just here to dance to our genes and circumstances? That's a very bleak philosophy, and it's not altogether accurate. Even if the physicalist conception of reality is true, which there's a tremendous amount of criticism and opposition that's credible against it, physical reductionism and so on. You can just sort of lost my train of thought here. I was going to say the classic atheistic nihilism that we see is not necessarily the way it is, and even if it is, there's a way of reframing that. That's why I talk about the law of attraction so much. Just let's assume that you do die. You're just talking about nihilism, right? Let's assume that when you're dead, there's no consciousness that continues in any kind. Well, does that mean it was meaningless, as nihilism tends to assert? I don't think it does at all. Our lives are completely punctuated by temporary moments of pleasure and suffering that have great meaning to them, that we can actually be grateful for. And was it meaningless that you went through it just because it ended? I don't think so, not necessarily. And there's no reason to be 100% convinced that that's the end of consciousness en soi in itself. You know what I mean? So yeah, nihilism leads to so much depression, but it doesn't have to. I just want to make sure I got everything there from you, Jay Wallaby. It feels unnatural, but it's well worth the effort to be open to making new connections. Absolutely, yeah. That's such a great thing that you mentioned. You also made another comment here, Jay Wallaby. Makes me think of a fantastic Barbara Sher TED Talk entitled "Isolation is the Dream Killer, Not Your Attitude." Really? Yeah, I haven't heard about Barbara Sher. Am I saying her name correctly? I'm definitely going to look that up. That sounds very interesting. So anyway, I think I'm caught up on my comments here. So I'm going to go back to another thing that was asked of me. Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip past a couple of these private questions and come back to them. There was some questions that you, being as I have you, Jay Wallaby 789, I'll address some of the things that you brought up here. I'll be honest, some of the stuff I'm not really acquainted with. I probably should have found time to do a little more research, so I apologize that I didn't. Your first question, topic suggestion that you gave was, what are your thoughts on the upcoming September Bethel announcement? that solicits funds in the entire organization, from the entire organization, covered by Berean pickets. Um, I think I did hear something about that. It might not have been through Berean pickets. It might have been through um, Mike and I can't remember her name. They remind me of the old couple from The Princess Bride. I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. I might have heard from them about the September Bethel announcement soliciting funds from the entire organization. I don't really know too much about it, and whatever I knew I forgot, so I'm sorry. Maybe comment some things in there that maybe you can jog my memory a little bit, and I'll see what comes back. Your second question: any additional advice on how physically in, mentally outs, PMOs, can affect change and progress in the organization? Now, J Wallaby 789, that is, yes, Kim Mikey, yes, that's right. I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. Anyway, that's a really good question, J Wallaby, because I've covered that in other videos. In fact, I think you commented on it. Maybe this is where that question comes from. Uh, yes, you can affect change and progress within the organization. I think it's jejune to naive to think that you can, uh, you know, dismantle the disfellowshipping policies or something like that. That's going to take a coordinated effort, I think. You know, things like that are you're not probably going to change from within the organization. But here's a very big thing, and I know elders who do this. Uh, you can at least decide not to give power to that. You know, if you're an elder, you can recuse yourself from judicial meetings, and where you certainly, you know, if you're in, if you're in Mayerthorpe and there's like 3 elders, and you know it takes 3 elders to form a judicial committee, you kind of gotta involve yourself on some of these judicial meetings. So I would say in that case, take up the cause of the underdog. You know, there are elders out there that I know, and they've explicitly told me, I don't agree with the disfellowshipping doctrine. I don't think that we should shun people directly. Minimizing association and maybe warning privately about members that, you know, these guys aren't exactly good news, you know, things like that, maybe, but, you know, industrial scale shunning, they disagree with it, and yet they retain um, their identity as a Jehovah's Witness and an elder. They're not against the governing body. They can do a lot of good, you know, like by saying, I'm just not going to participate in disfellowshipping committees, um, and they do what they can to take up the cause of the underdog. I don't know if I thanked you, Swim Sadie, for your contribution. I just want to make sure I'm thanking everybody here for all of their contributions. That's very nice of you. Thank you. I got a couple more questions here, Jay Wallaby. It was a lot, haha. I just wanted to spitball something for you to work with. I very much appreciate that. They've literally established a rate of donations for all publishers in the U.S. Not sure if it's global. Really? Okay, so yeah, I definitely need to visit this then. Maybe I was thinking of something else. So they've actually established an actual rate, like a suggested contribution. Am I hearing that correctly? That's hilarious, because if that's not plate passing, I don't know what is, you know. It's the classic, you know, local needs. We would never ask you folks to, you know, we'd never shake you down to give us money, but you know, it's not free, and if you could give us some money, that's pretty crazy. It amounts to like $8 per publisher. Yeah, I mean that's a lot of money, you know, across millions of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's crazy, and it's monthly. Wow, that's amazing. But I mean, what else can they do, right? Like if they're gonna, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying, you know, they've got a whole lot of litigation on their hands, especially in recent years. Lots of stuff to cover up, and that you've cooked your moose. You know, that's and every other religion is doing it, so why not? You know, that's probably their thinking on the matter. Again, I'm not defending it. I think it's incorrigible. More questions from you, Jay Wallaby. Being as I have you here, this is really good. Um, could Jesus have been a Roman fabrication to marry the religious beliefs of Judaism with Rome, covered by myth vision? Again, I didn't really get to look into that. We certainly know that this is well documented historically that under Cornelius, certainly was a with December 24th, what became Christmas and all this, was used to appeal to the pagans that, practice sun worship and all of that. Everyone knows very well about that. And that explains Catholicism. But your question is a little different from that. Could Jesus have been a Roman fabrication to kind of appeal to Judaism? I'm not really sure about that. I do think that Jesus was and it's not just that I think this, it's substantiated by Josephus and others, that there was a Jesus of Nazareth that was purported to have produced a lot of miracles and so on. So the Jesus of the Bible, I think that it's reasonable to conclude that he existed. Now, all of the supernatural stuff, that's what's in question, certainly from an atheist perspective. He obviously had a lot of influence. So, to what extent that's possible, I would think that maybe the Romans did find that this was a way of appealing to Judaism, but still bringing them into the Roman Empire. Beyond that, I don't really know too much else. That myth vision sounds really interesting. I'm going to look that up. What prevents this is Jay Wallaby again, by the way. What prevents XJW activists from banding together against Watchtower, and why so much infighting? This is another great question. I suppose nothing overtly prevents them, and I certainly support certain forms of activism from the outside that keeps the organization honest and tries to affect change from the outside. I think we need to be a little bit realistic about what can be done, but absolutely they should. But your second part of the question, it really interests me. Why so much infighting? I think there's one reason. There's two sides for one reason. What I mean by that is, we have come from an organization where we're told what to think, and when you leave, it's such a liberating thing, And so, on the one hand, you end up with people with their own perspectives. It's very democratic. You can be an atheist, you can be a Christian, you can be a New Ager, you can, there's a sundry group of individuals. There's so much variety in the XJW community. And that's the whole point of it, right? Is that people disagree. We're stuck with argument. And so they enjoy that fact, that I don't have to now follow the cult of Lloyd Evans, which is becoming something of a cult, as much as I respect some of the things he does. You don't have to go worship Richard Dawkins now. You don't have to worship, a lot of people were going to Ravi Zacharias. And then we found out that he was, after he died, that he was quite a piece of shit. So, this is kind of the thing about having your mind, is you can explore whatever you want. And you can agree, you can take what you agree, and you can disagree with the next. And so that explains, like, the democratic kind of cosmopolitan dynamic in the ex-witness community is the beauty of it. But now the opposite side of that one reason is it creates infighting. It's divisive, Jesus wasn't wrong when he said that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Uh, that's a fact. So, what's the answer, right? I would like to see. I'm not defending all the infighting per se. I like the plurality, the pluralism that exists among ex-witnesses, but I would just caution ex-witnesses, you know, have your disagreements, but still be open-minded to the other person's point of view. Acknowledge that you might not know the other side of the argument that well, and you'll be surprised by what you learn. Again, that's why I love books so much. Is there's while I have certain views, they're constantly evolving, and I don't feel committed to protect any identity. You know, and that's a good thing. Don't become ideologically possessed. We know where that road leads. We've done that, right? Very good question, Jay Wallaby. I'm going to ask another one of your questions here. Yeah, this was interesting. Have you ever discovered any XJW channels that resemble profiteering instead of activism? Uh, yes, I definitely see that is a motivation, and I'm not going to lie, it is a factor, right? I was producing Jehovah's Witness content, and I ended up becoming monetized on YouTube exclusively, I would say, on the Jehovah's Witness content. And so there is kind of a profit motivation in that. It's corrupting if you get carried away with it. On the other hand, um, the fact that people make money, I don't necessarily have a problem with that either. And I know you're not saying that, by the way. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm going to address this and come back to it. Hang on. Where do you see JW's relevance after the pandemic? Well, that's a good question. We're going to talk about that in a moment. That was Swim Sadie. Thank you very much, Swim Sadie. Back to your question about profiteering. I definitely think there are a few out there that it represents more than just a passion project. It's probably become something of a business for them. Lloyd Evans is probably, well, being the most prominent, and he would have really good watch time on his videos. I don't know what his cost per mile, the CPM, is on his YouTube, but I would think that he makes probably an okay income on that, and he lives in a very cheap part of the world. So yeah, and he doesn't seem to be suffering, so there's probably some profit motivation in there. Now, who was that XJW analyzer guy married to a blonde girl? I remember her name, Bethany. I can't remember his name. It was anyway. He's really useful. I think he was kind of full of piss and vinegar too, but he's gone now, at least as far as I know. And he had a Patreon. And that was one road that I couldn't really cross personally. I thought about opening up a Patreon, and there's a lot of very, very supportive XJWs. I don't know. I think I am a little too idealistic. Like the fact that people make money shouldn't turn anybody down, or shouldn't be a bad thing. But I don't know. There was something kind of hokey about that and cheesy that I find opening up a Patreon account and promoting it and getting donations that way. And a lot of the XJW community is sour. Like they're kind of sore when it comes to the money, because they've poured thousands of dollars into this organization. Certainly in by means of lost wages. They could have been, how many people could have pursued becoming a lawyer or becoming a doctor, some higher education, engineering, whatever, or could have become an entrepreneur and opened up a business, but they, the society kind of stole their youth. So a lot of us are kind of soured about that, and I think that it's good to be, kind of skeptical and not not just think that because somebody left the organization that now they're unimpeachable. You know, profit can be a very corrupting thing. You left another question here, and this was another super chat. My goodness, Jay Wallaby, you're very, very kind. You don't have to do that, but I'm certainly not going to turn it down. Speaking about profiteering, he says, I feel there could be a UN for Jehovah's Witnesses. It could have influence like the Protestant movement did. Lloyd could be a Ban Ki-moon instead of a J.W. Snowden. Yeah, great analogy. So yeah, like okay, this is interesting. Expand on that a little bit if you don't mind, Jay Wallaby. Uh, what do you think? What shape do you think that would take? Kind of the Protestant movement, obviously being critical of the JWs, but how do you kind of marry that with the UN approach? And Ban Ki-moon, I mean, obviously, I think you're mentioning that because of all the content I did on his memoir recently. Thanks, by the way. Uh, yeah, I think I much prefer the Ban Ki-moon method of leadership than the Snowden one. Although there's always room for whistleblowers. I'm not necessarily against that. Yeah, that's very interesting. Expand on that if you don't mind. And thanks again for your contribution. You also asked another question. Sorry, Willie B933. Hi, Derek. It's nice to listen to your live stream. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you. It's been a little while. I hope everything's well in your life, and yeah, just thanks for always being there. Willie B933 has been there. I think on my first video, weren't you? And yeah, I just really appreciated all your support and kind words over the years. I've been on here for 2 years now. So yeah, I hope life is treating you well, and I hope the sanitizer hasn't gotten your hands all dried like the rest of us. We'll pull through this eventually. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jay Wallaby. I am going to address your Rolf Ferruli question that you sent me earlier. I was just about to do that, but I forgot about Swim Sadie's question. Where do you see JW's relevance after the pandemic? So, you know, this is really interesting to me. You're gonna hear this expression a lot. Digital religion. A lot of religions have gone the digital route, and the witnesses, especially being that they ain't no, just Sunday meetup. They put a lot of money into this. I think the infrastructure and everything, and even though it's on the Zoom platform. So I think you're going to see this kind of be the new trend. I don't think they're going to divest themselves of all of that real estate. Although you never know, maybe they'll use it to finance it. They'll set that aside for, paying off their litigation, their legal troubles that they're going through right now. Who knows? But that's a lot of real estate out there. I think that depending on how we rebound from COVID, that'll still be a big. I'm running out of words. I can't think of the right word. I think that'll be a big factor. I think that won't go away right away. And something else, Swim Sadie, is they're really investing in televangelism. They would never call it as such, I don't think. But oh my God, are they ever becoming, like who's that guy that gets a lot of flack in the media? He's got private jets and everything. Copeland. Kenneth Copeland. It's almost getting that bad, like this religion is unrecognizable to me anymore. I just couldn't imagine this when I kind of faded away. I guess that's getting on to be about 12 years ago. I could not have seen this. This is amazing, So yeah, the digital religion, you never know. They might go that route. Maybe add to that, Swim Sadie, if you don't mind. I'm curious to know what you think, and maybe I can feed off what you're saying. We got some more stuff here. Jay Wallaby 789. I've worked out a petition, as you know, and I think there's a real potential if capitalized, current activists humble themselves to unite under a single objective: to make noise and to expose the inhumane policies. Religions need feedback to reform. I don't think any government should be expected to put an end to them, though I do not endorse any religion, reformed or not. Yeah, no, I understand that. And then you just said something here. I'm currently discussing this petition with a lawyer and a couple of full-time activists who are involved in the BLM movement. Yeah, and you've sent me some stuff. I'm sorry that I haven't really been able to dissect everything. So far, I think you're on the right track. I think that it's a good thing to do. I would always say, and again, I don't know enough about your particular project, what you've written, and I know you're still editing it, so I don't want to criticize it or anything. I would just say, be realistic about what you think, first of all, is possible with the governing body side of things, right? And then, of course, the more realistic you are about what kind of reform is possible, that's going to be a very credible bit of activism to promote to the ex-witness community, who may land on either side of many positions. But if you can, and again, I'm not criticizing what you sent me at all. I think you're going in a good direction. I don't really have an opinion just yet, but I would just say be realistic about what's possible, and that's going to be more credible for people to get behind. And I think it's a fantastic thing that you're doing. I really wish it the most success. And there was something else here. Oh no, someone retracted their message. See, son, please do, if you're just editing that, please send it back, because I didn't get to read it, and I do want to address your comments here. There was something else you mentioned, Jay Wallaby. I don't want to forget it. Currently discussing this petition with a lawyer and a couple of them. Yeah, and it would be, I would really, if you're flushed to do that, to talk to lawyers and other experts in the field who are acquainted with this, I think that's a wonderful thing, and maybe if you don't get what you want, it still will put pressure on the organization, from the outside. And I would say too, I think you did mention this in your petition, offering some way that people can add their name without it being a full name, but just to show that, there are people out there that are very disgruntled about, I think your main thing is the shunning, right? Very disgruntled about that, and the way they're handling their pedophile cases, child abuse cases, the reporting with authorities, cooperating with authorities on that. So yeah, I think that holds a lot of promise, and good for you, You also said, I'm not in a position to put it into effect. No worries, man, and thank you, C-Sun. Definitely it's a delicate matter and needs thorough preparation. I'm just planting the seeds for now. Yeah, and that's so great. I didn't see her, I don't know if that's a her, sorry. I didn't see C-Sun's message, and I'm kicking myself because I wish I would have read that. Great stuff, by the way. Your last question, though, Jay Wallaby, this was in the lead up, my community post of this live stream. You had asked something. My thoughts on Rolf Ferrulli or his book. I haven't read it yet. I did take a fairly close, I would say maybe 10 minutes sort of perusing at certainly the liner notes and the contents. It certainly seems, he's a bright guy, there's no denying that. He's very intelligent. But he's obviously looking at things from a galaxy away from where I'm looking at things. He's a biblical scholar, which of course that kind of to me is, I know there's a lot of defenses for the Bible and so on, but there's a few things that I think a lot of older folks are so committed to the Bible just because of the profound cultural impact it's had. And so it's very difficult to see outside of that matrix. I'm not going to be like typical atheists who say, that the Bible uh, endorsed slavery, because just as an example, or overtly condemns homosexuality, or takes a position on, pro-life legislation or pro-choice legislation, even though there are scriptures that at first blush seem very compelling in that direction, and many Christians feel they're committed to those positions. Um, but I don't think that the scriptures, why I'm not the type of person to say, the Bible outrightly endorsed slavery, is because for the context of the time, it was a very progressive arrangement. Slavery was an economic fact of the ancient world, and that's just one example, right? If anything, they were offered, the Mosaic Law offered people an opportunity to work off debts, and for a system that was very benighted, very ignorant, very superstitious, it was actually quite liberal for its time. It was a step in the direction of our modern world. And so now that totally reframes the Bible, doesn't it? Because an argument that witnesses make for the Bible is, even though polygamy seemed to be acceptable in the Bible, they say, that doesn't mean that God endorsed it. He just tolerated it. You know what I mean? And so, again, if you're an atheist who thinks that the Bible does endorse slavery and, homophobia and all of this, discrimination of all kinds, I'm more of the view that the Bible can be twisted to say whatever you want. But a lot of people, they put so much value. Ralph Ferrulli, we're still talking about him, by the way. He seems of the mindset that, this cultural impact that it's had is so profound that we just can't turn our backs on it. And so I'm right out of the gate, I'm kind of on the opposite side of that. Look online at the Dead Sea Scrolls. These vellum documents that are so old and incomplete. And yes, I know that the defense for that from a scholar like him would be something like, no document 3,500 years old, certainly tracing back to the oldest parts of the Bible, are going to be, they'd have to be scribed in rock, and even then they'd be worn away. So how do you preserve the tradition, the oral tradition? They would defend that there are very meticulous scholars that kept up records throughout the years, and so enough is there in the vellum documents, the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they coordinate very much with the modern Testament of the Bible, modern translations, and they say, so we have good reason to believe that the palimpsest, the parts that are missing or obscured, are accurate in the Bible, the parts that weren't. But again, it's that to me, it still doesn't square, So I appreciate where he's coming from, but Ralph Ferrulli, I think he's looking from a very antiquated point of view, and I'm probably not the most objective person, but neither is he. I just don't think that the Bible that there's a good enough evidence out there to support that it's divine, certainly that it's even historically accurate. And as you know, if you're going to accept that it's historically accurate, there's still a long distance to go to say that it's divine, right? So those are my thoughts on Ralph Ferrulli's book. He is interesting. I kind of applaud him in a few directions, that he had the gumption to speak up. You know, he certainly was not putting his reputation first, and that takes character, you know. Outside of that, I don't know much about the guy. I watched, I think, most of that video, that one video that he put out. Well, I think I was talking more about mental illness, about witness in the witness groups, in the witness community. So no, very interesting person, and I'm curious to see sort of what comes of this. And I should add it to my wish list, but there's just so many books that I want to get around to, you know. So anyway, let me know what you think of that description there of Ralph Ferrulli there, J.W. J. Wallaby. He said, first of all, Mr. Mario 477, okay, man, I don't know I don't know if you said something earlier, if that's a response to, or, yeah, I don't know if that's sarcastic, okay, man, or what, but all right, too. J. Wallaby 789, yeah, definitely take the book with a grain of salt, but he does clearly expose the shoehorn interpretation of the faithful and discreet slave. Governing body has no scriptural base. Oh, absolutely no, and that's yeah, we're totally on the same page there. Yeah, I of course I endorse any kind of criticism that he has towards the Octopope in upstate New York. Swin Sadie, there's an entire museum dedicated to Dead Sea Scrolls at the Israeli Museum. Seeing it was very disappointing for me due to so many fragments missing. Yeah, I can imagine. Maybe expand on that, Swim Sadie. What was so I would say, what's the opposite of compelling? You know, what was so compelling to you that the Dead Sea Scrolls exposed, in your opinion? To me, that's my issue. Is okay. Yeah, say the Bible was, you know, brought. Was very meticulously kept up to date, you know, and the fact is nothing is going to last thousands of years, you know, no record whatsoever. So what do you expect? I just still think that we can't even agree on a present interpretation. We can't even agree on the right interpretation of the Constitution of the United States. You know, like there are legal scholars that debate, you know, all manner of things about the Constitution, what the founding fathers meant. You know, for example, the first few words of the Constitution, we the people. Are we talking about we the people of 1776, or are we talking about we the people for the whole lifespan of the United States of America? That completely reframes how you interpret the Constitution. Well, how much more so? I mean, that document's only like 200 and some years, right? Like the Bible, you know, the latest revision of the Bible is something like 400 years after Christ, right? I think. I'm kind of fuzzy on this, and we rely very much on the Catholic Church, you know, for the Bible in its modern day, you know, that the Gospels were hobbled together properly and all the rest of it. Thank you so much, AC, for the $5. Oh my God, you guys are so generous. I love you so much. You know, we rely so much on the Catholic Church that the Gospels, basically the entire Christian Greek scriptures, were put together properly. How much skepticism does that cast on the Bible in itself, you know, let alone the Hebrew and Aramaic scriptures? So I recognize I have an atheist bias, and take this for what you will, but I'm not convinced that the Bible is historically accurate, first of all, and certainly it's a long distance from that to go to the divine part of what people claim. So that's my views. I do have a bias, though. I get it, but we all do. Swim Sadie, as we know, even punctuation can change meaning. There are entire sections missing, not to mention missing words on virtually every segment. Yeah, yeah, I know, and that's what's so disturbing about it, right? And so you do have to take it on faith that they've, the scribes over the years have kept this up. But there's great contradiction among Bible scholars, even the Quran. You know, this was really insightful here. I read this a few years back. This is one interpretation of the Quran. Okay, now you have the Arabic. What I liked so much about this is a very respected scholarly version of the Quran. You have all the original Arabic in there, in the margins, and there's still a great amount of contradiction within the community among scholars about what the Quran actually means. I mean, of course, lots of convinced or a lot of devout Muslims, we know how vastly, how varied the belief is in the scholarship of the Quran. They all accept that it's divine, but lots of them feel that you can't even understand the Quran unless you understand Arabic. Well, and how much do languages change over the course of hundreds of years, certainly thousands of years? I was reading Don Quixote, that classic of his. What's that called? I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry. Anyway, that classic book of them wandering to the promised land, and it's I couldn't understand it. Like this is, I think this is 300 or 400 years old, right? And I can't keep up with it. It was tough enough for me when I read all of Sherlock Holmes, for me to kind of grasp the Victorian era English, and I'm not a linguist, but it took me probably a couple of his books to really grasp what, all the expressions back then and all of that. I could probably pick it up now and have full comprehension. But it took me a couple of books to really settle into it, get used to that way of speaking. Same with, Shakespeare. How widely is that interpreted? And again, that's only a few hundred years old. And I think the most devastating objection, though, is we can't even agree on what the Constitution of the United States is saying fully, right? Oh, here's something really interesting. If any of you follow me for my philosophy stuff, I've got something really interesting. I've been watching a fair amount of Ronald Dworkin because I'm such a fan of Thomas Nagel. And he's dead now. Dworkin is not Thomas Nagel, to my understanding. He was such a bright guy, and he did a lecture on what interpretation is. I think in a future video, when how I split these up into other videos, I'm going to release this one, and then in the description I will tag or link, the video for Dworkin on interpretation, this brilliant lecture that he gave. And he was talking about the interpretation of art and how you see through different periods of time how at one time this piece of art looked, full of gaiety and happiness and revelry and like beautiful revelry, parties and stuff. And like no more than 100 or 150 years later, all of the art critics of the time were saying, no, this is actually a very, very melancholy, dark depiction of the human hedonic impulse. So we can't even agree from one century to the next on what art is saying. You know, this is another fascinating thing I think about just with biblical interpretation, but think of the music of Eminem. You know, for his time, he was considered homophobic when he first came out, and then he did that big thing, um, you know, at the music awards there with Elton John, and you know, people thought because of what he said, you know, that he was racist and stuff like this, and now he's a champion of you know, sexually diverse lifestyles and you know, the marginalized groups and races out there, you know. So that's only transpired over the course of 20 years. We completely revise our conception, our interpretation of history itself. This is why I find philosophy just uh, so satisfying to read about, is because we think we're all sharing the same reality, and we're just to a very large extent we're not, you know. So yeah, that's fascinating. um, Feel free to ask more questions, guys. I'm going to go back to a couple of these live or sorry, these private questions here. These were a little more personal to me. I think AC, you sent a couple of these. Does your family still talk to you? I think I answered that. Would you ever go back if the Jehovah's Witnesses would get rid of some things in the system? Well, okay, so I have been back, uh, you know, since I woke up for a memorial. And no, I didn't protest at that memorial, even though some people think I did. There was a protest at the memorial while I was there, but I wasn't part of it. This was around the time that well, about a year after I left, so everyone, they were like, oh, there was what in Victoria, Derek was there, so he must have been part of the protest. I wasn't. Anyway, I went there because just to kind of keep an eye on life, the wildlife, as I say. Uh, I like it, and of course, I expect all the things that they're gonna say, you know, about disfellowshipping and all the nonsense that I just don't agree with anymore. But it's like, you know, I'm not against just checking up on them. If they change things, though, no, I could never go back thinking, oh, you know, the governing body has reclaimed their credibility and maybe they really are divine and directed by God. I mean, no, the shackles have fallen. I can't unsee what I've seen. Um, you know, if the culture in my lifetime ever became, you know, accepting towards people of me, and I could there was a place for dissent, you know, perhaps not in public, obviously, but you know, among private comments and private conversations with believers, I might go back and hang out with them. They're people, you know, like I have no ill will to them. There's a lot of great people in every community. Oh, here's something kind of philosophical that I give a lot of thought to too about Jehovah's Witness community is there's a concept that you should give a lot of thought. It's there is as much diversity within groups as there are between them. That's a really powerful perspective to have whenever you're approaching people of different viewpoints and religions and cultures and so on. There is as much diversity within groups as there are between them. So you can, we're really seeing this in, you know, the West's interaction with the Muslim world, for example. How many people out there are of the Sam Harris view or of the, you know, Najib Nawaz and Salman Rushdie, although he's much more palatable, of those thinkers who think that the Muslim world is uniform in their interpretation of the Quran and their view towards democratic deliberation and all of that. No, like they're not. The Muslim world is incredibly diverse. You know, there's these statistics that come out of the Muslim world that, you know, 90% of Afghanistan agrees with, you know, stoning prostitutes or or stoning adulterers and homosexuals. Okay, maybe that is the political makeup of that particular part of the world. But if, just put yourself in their perspective, if you were called by any authority or approached by any authority in Afghanistan and asked, do you agree with the Quran purportedly endorsing capital punishment upon homosexuals and atheists and adulterers and prostitutes? And of course you're going to get one answer, one consistent answer. It doesn't necessarily mean that they actually believe it. You know, if I was as a witness and someone came up to me, do you agree with disfellowshipping? I might have said, you know, to a perfect stranger, I might have said, well, yeah, I agree with it, but it's the finer details that matter. You know, it's what shape does that ultimately take? Does it mean overtly shunning somebody? Does everybody in the society think that you know, shunning all looks the same way? That if your daughter leaves and takes up with a man outside of the faith, you know, that now you have no contact with her? You're going to find people, even elders, even circuit overseers, and I bet even within the governing body, I would venture to say, people landing on either side of those type of questions, even though they all support disfellowshipping, you know, in name. There's as much diversity within groups as there are between them. Keep that in mind. That's a very powerful thing to think about. So yeah, would I ever go back if they would get rid of some things? Not just for fun, just to check on the wildlife. I wouldn't go there for you know, to be spiritually enlightened by them. What was the first holiday you celebrated, and did you feel guilty? I believe the first holiday I celebrated was my birthday, and no, I didn't really care. I didn't feel guilty about that, because I felt that, like, everybody on Facebook, even by the time that I hadn't woken up, witnesses were saying, you know, enjoy the day that you were born, or whatever, this anniversary of the day you're born. It's like you're all but saying happy birthday, for heaven's sakes. Just wish them happy birthday. So, and the reasoning from the society was extremely silly. You know, they said that there's basically, the main argument they go to is that some bad things happened on birthdays, you know, in the Bible. Therefore, God is against celebrating birthdays. It's a silly argument. They tried to make some connection to the occult, and the other defense or objection to birthdays, I should say, was about that it promotes greed or something like that. All the gift giving to one person. It's like, oh, for crying out loud! These are not. Even as a witness, I thought that was all really silly, you know. So I didn't feel guilt, but I did feel a twinge of guilt when I celebrated Christmas. Even though intellectually I only did it when I was ready for it, you know. I didn't think I was practicing false religion. I was already an atheist, but I don't know. I just felt, I guess all of this conditioning, and, you know, the harlot riding the wild beast, and that's not Jesus' birthday, and what are you even doing? You don't believe in Jesus. It's just, a little bit of that residual guilt was there, which I think is very powerful in the faith too. With, like, for situations, not holidays anymore, but thinking about situations where people, you know, they have sex, they fornicate, right? They lose their virginity out of the faith, and they feel terribly guilty. Well, are you sure that guilt stems from you know, aggressing some moral law in the universe that God has instantiated? No. Like think it through. There's reason to be very cautious and careful in your sexual relationships with people and all of that. But for heaven's sakes, you know, you shouldn't feel this Catholic guilt for that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Anyway, uh, the guilt thing is a very powerful dynamic in there. Willie B 933. I think that most people within the organization are invested to the point of being fearful of any expression of critical or independent thought and its consequences. Well, that's so true. Swim Sadie, so true. Willie B. Yeah, there is a there is decidedly a particular culture that permeates the witnesses. You know, you have to balance that concept I mentioned earlier. I'm not talking to you, Willie B 933. You already know this, but you have to balance the view of there's diversity within groups as there are between them, with the fact that a culture is a particular way. Even actually, this is really interesting. There's a word for this. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm reading Mark Carney's book. He talks about this, where psychologically they're finding that there is this dynamic that we will not vocalize certain beliefs we have, and we're not even aware we hold certain beliefs because we can't communicate them within the culture. But we find that as the culture changes, people are more confident in expressing kind of latent beliefs that they had. You know, we've certainly seen that with how tolerance has become towards the sexually diverse communities, sexual and gender diverse community, LGBTQ and so on. In the past 10 years, we've become so accepting of that, and it's perfectly okay now to not just come out of the closet if you are gay or if you associate as non-binary or whatever, but also to say that you side with them. In fact, there's a lot of pressure to side with them nowadays. Whereas even 10 years ago, I was watching. I was recently watching some, what was it? Charlie Sheen, 2.5 Men. And the jokes that they were making, like, you would not get away with that today about the LGBTQ. You know, so, that is a psychological thing that happens is we, while there is a lot of diversity within communities, culture does have its role in how much you're willing to say publicly. Okay, so I'm going to answer a couple more questions here. Would I ever join another religion again? Well, I think I've answered, this was a private question. I've answered that to some degree. I don't really feel any affiliation for any organized religion, any popular religion, certainly any Abrahamic religions. I have gone to, pre-COVID, I've gone to many churches and soup kitchens that were set up by the church and volunteered for that, and that's all healthy. These people are extremely cosmopolitan, very accepting. Even the more conservative brands of Christianity out there are extremely welcoming. To people of all kinds of lifestyles, or if you're supportive of the activism of the LGBTQ. I'm not gay. Maybe if you're new here, you're starting to get that impression, but they're extremely welcoming to people on that side of the spectrum, or sympathetic to what they've been through. These marginalized groups, like, it's not, most religions are not like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Even your hard-nosed Catholics are still extremely accepting. It's probably different in the southern part of the states. In the really evangelical Baptist parts are probably 100 years out of date, but for the most part, they're great. And I read a lot of Christian intellectuals, and it doesn't bother me to expose myself to their point of view. We got some more comments here. They condemned televangelism because they said you can't reach hearts without person to person teaching. Now it's their central focus. Yeah, whatever happened to that, eh? Yeah, and I wonder to what extent COVID is responsible to that. Do you think that Swim Sadie, right? That was Swim Sadie who said that. Do you think that that will come back? The kind of the more personal approach. I'm curious to see what you think of that. Um, I'm going to select, I'm not going to be able to answer all these questions. I think we're going to end soon. But before I end, okay, this is interesting. Okay, so I got this question privately a couple of months ago. Dear Derek, I watched your video on the JW's blood doctrine. How can you defend that, man? Not cool. I respect where you're coming from. In fairness, I was very clear right at the outset. I do not condone it from a moral perspective. I do endorse it. I should say I agree with how the legality has fallen on this. I agree that I agree with the consistency of the legislation. That's you can say that that's endorsing it. I don't endorse any kind of coercion about things that involve decisional autonomy. Going back to this pandemic thing, Swim Sadie just clarified, not just since pandemic, they've been building a media empire for years. Yeah, that's true. So you think then that they will probably be on that for a while following COVID, even if we kind of go back to normal, hey? That is true. They have been going away from, the knocking on doors approach. Even though, I remember even 15 years ago them saying, using scriptural basis, we will always be a religion that goes door to door and evangelizes that way because their Pauline scripture, there is a Pauline first century precedent for that. They've probably walked that back now. Going back to the blood issue, no, I don't condone it morally. I think that how the Supreme Court has decided these in Western democratic lands is very consistent. And it actually, I think it's one of the few reasons why we don't have a mandatory vaccine yet. Now, these questions of the blood doctrine will probably be revisited and reinvigorated in the aftermath of COVID-19 because we're kind of finding that, there is a public imperative the public does have a say on what you do with your body to some extent, If you don't take the vaccine, this is going to happen. You're going to infections will increase, and that's going to take that's going to cost public health care, and so it involves, whether you agree with this COVID thing or not, it involves that argument. And so I think following the pandemic, if they do make mandatory vaccines, certainly for certain industries, or straight across the board, I think that it's going to reinvigorate some of these questions about medical decisional autonomy. But I agree, as it's presently standing, I agree with how the courts have largely decided this, that the state does not have a right to say that you need this sort of treatment or not. And there's also, I know I'm repeating everything I said in that video, but there is discussion, while there is something of a consensus that blood transfusions are necessary and all this, it's not just a witness position. There are objections to um, blood transfusions, and there's a lot of support, by the way, for bloodless alternatives, independent of you know the religious side of this argument. There are secularist doctors that, on a scientific basis, disagree with other doctors on this. So I feel a tremendous amount of sympathy for those who were socially coerced into this. I interviewed Michelle Hoffman, and God, it just broke my heart. That her husband, who passed away, he had to take blood transfusions. He was an elder for a time, and then he got very ill, and he was starting to question his faith. Both of them were at the time, and he privately took some blood transfusions towards the end of his life. And she said, I wouldn't have gotten those extra months of life out of him. I mean, the medical community definitely confirmed that. And it's like, well, like, yeah, obviously my heart goes out to her incredibly. I don't I don't endorse what the witnesses do, how they use the disfellowshipping, the threat of excommunication to manipulate into these medical decisions. That's almost as egregious as the state themselves interfering. But now you see how it becomes not just a situation of medical autonomy, but if the religion is saying you can't have a blood transfusion, how this becomes a religious membership decision now from the standpoint of secular authorities, right? And in the States, they'll be seen as endorsing a religion, breaking the Establishment Clause of the Constitution by weighing into that, because it necessarily involves questions of religious membership, not just medical matters. One more thing I want to say about the blood issue here. First of all, actually, J Wallaby 789, you keep throwing money at me, my friend. That's so nice of you. Fear of the paranormal is also a deeply buried taboo that JWs carry. I did DIY exposure therapy to rid myself of it. It was hard, but a major relief. Wow, really, hey? Oh, and Swin Sadie, thank you so much. You guys are throwing so much money at me. Tell us your thoughts on mental illness within the community. Is it unusually high? Okay, so I'm going to get to that too. Both of you guys. Just to wrap up this whole thing about medical autonomy, the question becomes very complicated when it involves children. That is often when the media blows these stories up, you'll notice. A 25-year-old who decides not to get a blood transfusion, that's not really going to make the news. Not really, unless there's some extenuating circumstance. He's a witness who had a caretaker or something like that. He didn't have all of his faculties, something like that. But now, this is where it's still not the child or the parents who have a la carte in this. There's, in most Western democratic lands, there is something approximating a best interest test and a mature minors test. And you're going to see people land, judges are going to say, okay, the state does actually have to get involved here. The state trumps the parental authority in this case, based on the medical evidence and based on the maturity of all the parties involved. Other times, the judge will swing the other way, depending on how the child or the mature minor comports himself. So I'm not... morally, I definitely disagree with the blood doctrine of the witnesses, and they exert a lot of undue authority. But the moment this becomes a matter of law, I think that secular societies have towed a pretty understandable, defensible position on this, even though it tips in the favor of witnesses. So, you can say I was endorsing them. You can say, like, how can you defend that man? I understand where you're coming from. I don't endorse it morally. I just think that it's a consistent legal position. Okay, moving on to these other things though. So yeah, J Wallaby 789. I'm curious to know with the paranormal thing that goes on. You said, yeah, the paranormal is deeply buried in taboo in that the JWs carry. You certainly see that with the law of attraction. I get so many witnesses and Christians who say, it's demonic, it's connected to the occult. And there are definitely proponents of the law of attraction out there who say that, or sorry, who are connected to the occult, and they also, endorse tarot, for example. I'm not of that group, the central claims of the law of attraction don't commit you to that. But yeah, there is this fear of the paranormal in the psyche of the JWs. What is this DIY exposure? That's what I wanted to ask you about. If you want to, I'm just really curious about that and how it worked. Exposure therapy. I really endorse exposure therapy. It can be very helpful. Where did you? What articles did help you with that, if you don't mind? And again, thank you so much for your donation. And to your point, Swim Sadie, tell us your thoughts on mental illness within the community. Is it unusually high? From what I saw, it certainly is. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't know, but there have been studies, and I think Ferrulli touched on this even. Back in the 90s, I think they studied some congregations, some witness communities, and they did see an uptick of mental illness among them. And certainly, in fact, there's a video on this on YouTube, abuse of prescription drugs among witnesses. So what that's attributable to and how detailed the studies are, we should be careful about that too. But I think it's safe to say that mental illness is probably higher among the community. I think that that's a defensible point of view, just like the view that divorce is higher among witness communities. Again, we have very paltry evidence on that, but the evidence that we do have is very strongly suggestive. And what's so interesting, I know you're talking about mental illness, but just speaking about marital issues, divorces and so on, what's so interesting to me about the witnesses is you're forced into committing adultery. Really, you can't absolve a relationship without committing adultery or dying. And I know that there are some people out there who would rather die than live out their life with this miserable mate of theirs. So, but yeah, like it forces you to commit adultery because there's no other way of ending the marriage. And it's like you have to ask yourself from a pragmatic perspective, how unreasonable is such a policy? J Wallaby 789. I had so many testimonies given to me of demon activity growing up. Yeah, I've heard a lot of those too. It scared me as a kid, and I feared certain movies on the topic that still filled me with fear today. Yeah, and perhaps that exposure therapy. Oh, here we go. The psychoanalyst, excuse me, and the exorcist perspectives and psychology, or perspectives on psychology and religion. Yeah, that's interesting. Swim Sadie, I think the delusional Armageddon remedy that they advance attracts at least marginally mentally ill people. Oh yeah, definitely. Going back to that mental illness problem, they there's so many reasons to be mentally ill in this society. It's just the stigma attached to depression, for example. Well, you need to go out in the ministry more. You need to, you need to pray more. You need to do more personal study. There's always a good reason to feel guilty about what you're doing as a witness. That's just a foregone conclusion. If you're not guilty, then you're overconfident and you're just waiting to be taken out of the society. What a way to live, eh? J. Wallaby 789. I learned that the creation of that movie was actually an exercise in many psychological fear tactics. Yeah, and what you're saying there earlier, J. Wallaby, about um, the paranormal being embedded in the JW psyche, that's a very true observation, certainly in my view, that it affects me to this day. You know, you could say that I did some exposure therapy, you know, DIY exposure therapy like you, when it came to, like going into churches, for example. I thought, you know, the first time I did it, I still felt this guilt, kind of like how I felt guilty for celebrating Christmas a little bit, even though intellectually there's nothing bothering me about it. I just felt guilty. Um, you know, so that paranormal thing certainly plays. Like, this is the lurking place of demons, Babylon the Great. You know, that's how they present it, and that sticks with you psychologically. So now I can go into a church perfectly feeling fine about it. It's not, you know, there's nothing to feel guilty over. It's beautiful architecture. It gives you an insight into the human psyche. It's wonderful, um, and the you know, I also had to kind of inure myself to not the dark. Like, I mean, I wasn't afraid of the dark really, but afraid of kind of spooky dark places. You know, just you always feel a tap on the shoulder or someone breathing in your ear. You know, and that took a while to get rid of. But that's something that permeates society, right? Like, there are totally secular atheists who, you know, get the willies and they just can't get that hypersensitive agency detection out of their psychology. I fear, this is Jay Wallaby, the fear I was feeling was entirely because the Watchtower Society let that suspicion fester. So I'm relieved as a result of the therapy. Well, good for you, and yeah, I should look into that. And those you watching, if this is appealing to you, the psychoanalyst and exorcist perspectives on psychology and religion. That's a really interesting suggestion, Jay Wallaby. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to start to wind this down. Jay Wallaby, amen. It's good to be free, isn't it? Oh, you're right about that. There's no shame in fear of the unknown, but it's criminal to flesh out the demons as much as the Watchtower Society does. Yeah, yeah. I mean, even colloquially, we have our demons, right? That's just a fact of psychology. No supernatural, no appeal to the supernatural necessary. I'm going to take one more question. Oh, Swim Sadie, it seems to me you've come out of the organization very well intact. I hope you find lots of happiness. And same to everyone out there. Thank you so much, Swim Sadie. You know, we all have our demons. As we're talking Jay Wallaby there. I don't think anybody leaves unscathed. Thank you very much for your encouragement. And I'm not aware of your personal situation, Swim Sadie. I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit. But, you know, best of luck to you. You sound very healthy as well. Your comments are very insightful. And thank you so much for staying tuned. I also wanted to do a shout out to King of the Dots. I don't know if he's here, but he engages so much on all of my content. And he was a former witness. He is a former witness. And he's such an interesting guy. We don't agree on a whole lot, but we certainly have interesting conversations. So shout out to you, King of the Dots, if you're there. One more question. I really wanted to answer this. This was something sent to me personally. And then I think I'll close it out after that. What are your thoughts on Sam Harris? Given you are an atheist and your history with the Jehovah's Witnesses, why are you so tough on the new atheists? That just surprises me. Yeah, well, it kind of surprises me, to be honest. Sam Harris has come a long way. I'm going to give him some credit. It's really interesting. I really liked these guys. The new atheists definitely kind of got me thinking about religion and the supernatural and all of this, they kind of got the ball rolling for me. You know, I watched a lot of Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and a little bit of Matt Dillahunty, although I never took to him. I don't really like him. The Daniel Dennett. But I found their views after a few months extremely parochial. Of the new atheists, I still to this day respect Christopher Hitchens the most. Not for his position on religion, not for his position on Iraq, certainly, but I think he was such a rare and such an incredible person. Like just the way he spoke, his class, his appreciation of literature, his political insight was just phenomenal. Like just the history and world events, he's dearly missed. You know, he was such a good he was such a good guy. But Sam Harris, to your question on that, he's come a long way. I kind of was soured on him, not as much as Richard Dawkins. I don't think anyone will top the list with Richard Dawkins for me and Matt Dillahunty, but Sam Harris was coming close. And I'm sorry, he has lost a few debates. That morality debate he had with William Lane Craig was pathetic. He didn't even remotely. I think he got completely spanked by William Lane Craig, and yet he could have done so much better. You know, because William Craig is not. He doesn't have the final say on this. He's got some problems too, as much as I respected him more on the morality debate. Now, where I will give Sam Harris some credit, I would say since the Trump era, he strikes me as incredibly perceptive on speaking about Trump, speaking about race, speaking about sexual diversity, his liberalism, progressive point of view. There's a lot of things that I'm, sympathetic to, and I think that he needs to tone down his rhetoric against the Islam, the Muslim community for sure. Still, even to this day, he does. But he has come a long way on that. He has been a little more conciliatory towards religion. So Sam Harris, yeah, he's coming up in my books. There's some really good stuff that he's produced in recent years. But as for his atheism, he's still a little bit too identitarian, and still way too materialist. So that's just how I feel about him. Okay, so I'm going to close things out. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to read a couple of these comments. But again, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for those donations. That was incredibly sweet of all of you. I really, yeah, that's very touching. I learned that, okay, so I read that. I'm going to read out a couple more of these and then I'm going to leave. The fear I was feeling was entirely because, okay, I think I talked that. Amen. It's good to be isn't it? It seems to me. Oh, I guess there's just 2 comments left. So nice to meet you. This is from Jay Wallaby. I'll be starting a YouTube channel next year. I would love to. I'll be your first subscriber. Let me know immediately, because you've been very supportive, Jay Wallaby. I mean, hell, we've basically talked to each other the whole half live stream here. This is amazing. And Swim Sadie, best of luck, Jay Wallaby 789. I'll watch for it. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Tune in again. We'll do this hopefully again soon. I know I keep saying that, but it'll happen. And yeah, all I can say is thank you. It was very nice. We'll see you around. Take care. Now I got to figure out how to. Oh, here we go. Here's how we end it.